The day I walked through the gleaming glass doors of that San Francisco penthouse, my heart slammed against my ribs like it wanted out. Wyatt Harrington, the paralyzed billionaire whose name had been on every medical file I studied, was the same guy who had kissed me once in college, then vanished like smoke, leaving me to question everything I thought I knew about myself and love. I stood there in my crisp navy scrubs, clipboard clutched too tight in my sweaty palm, while the head nurse rattled off protocols about his spinal injury medication schedule and the strict no-visitor policy his family had imposed. Wyatt sat in a custom wheelchair by the floor-to-ceiling window, sunlight pouring over his broad shoulders, turning his dark hair almost bronze. 10 years had carved lines around his eyes and a hardness to his jaw, but those same stormy gray eyes that once looked at me like I was the only safe place in the world locked onto mine now with pure stunned recognition. "Easton." His voice came out rough, like he hadn't used it much lately. The head nurse paused mid-sentence, glancing between us. I forced a professional smile even as my stomach twisted. "Mr. Harrington, it's good to meet you. I'm Easton Reed, your new live-in caregiver." He didn't smile back. His hands tightened on the wheelchair arms, the only part of him that still moved freely below the chest. "Reed. Small world." The words hung heavy between us while the nurse finished her handover and left us alone in the echoing penthouse. I set my duffel bag down, trying to remember how to breathe. This was supposed to be a fresh start, a 6-month contract that paid enough to finally pay off my student loans and maybe give me space to figure out who I was after my last relationship crashed and burned because I couldn't fully commit. Instead, I was staring at the man who had been my first real heartbreak. Wyatt wheeled himself closer, the soft hum of the motors the only sound for a long moment. "You look good. Still running from small-town Nebraska." I laughed, once a short, nervous sound. "Something like that. And you're a billionaire now. Guess the tech startup dreams worked out." He glanced out at the bay where sailboats cut white trails across the blue. "Yeah. Worked out real well until the car wrapped around a tree 2 years ago." His tone was flat, but I caught the flicker of something darker underneath. I stepped forward, automatically checking the positioning of his legs the way the physical therapy notes had taught me. "I'm here to help with daily care, mobility exercises, and anything else you need. No judgment, no drama. Just professional." He looked up at me, then really looked, and for a second the old Wyatt peeked through the guarded mask. "Professional? Sure. We were always great at pretending that's all we were." My pulse spiked. I busied myself unpacking the medical supplies the agency had delivered, arranging pill organizers and therapy bands on the marble counter. Outside the window, the city sparkled innocent and bright, while inside the air felt thick with everything we weren't saying. I had spent years convincing myself that single kiss in the rain behind the dorms had been a fluke, a confused college moment. Wyatt had left the next day without a word, and I had buried the ache under textbooks and later under safe, straight-passing relationships that never quite fit. Now here he was completely dependent on me, and the past was sitting right there in his eyes, daring me to acknowledge it. The first week blurred into routine. I helped him transfer from bed to chair, managed his pain meds, guided him through arm-strengthening exercises that left him sweating and cursing. He was sharp-tongued and impatient, barking orders about conference calls and stock reports like the paralysis was just an annoying interruption to his empire. But at night, when the penthouse grew quiet and I sat in the guest room reviewing his chart, I couldn't stop replaying that college night, the way his hand had trembled against my cheek, the way he had whispered, "I think I'm in love with you, Easton," right before everything fell apart. By day 7, the tension cracked open. We were out on the private terrace, the city lights starting to flicker on below. I was adjusting the blanket over his lap when he caught my wrist. "You never asked why I left." His voice was low, rough. I froze. "It wasn't my place then, and it's not now. I'm here for your care, Mr. Harrington." He laughed without humor. "Mr. Harrington. Cute. You used to call me Wyatt when you were falling asleep on my dorm floor after studying all night." I pulled my hand away gently, but the warmth of his skin lingered. "That was 10 years ago. People change." "Not everything." He looked out at the darkening bay. "My father found out about us. Or at least about me. Threatened to cut me off, pull every string to ruin my future if I didn't end it and go straight. I was 20, scared, stupid. So I ran. Built the company, got the money, thought I could buy my way out of the guilt. Then the accident happened, and suddenly none of it mattered. Silence stretched between us, thick and alive. I swallowed hard, fighting the surge of old anger and something warmer I didn't want to name. I'm sorry that happened to you. But I'm not here to revisit the past. Wyatt's gaze flicked back to mine, steady and unflinching. Maybe the past is the only thing worth revisiting. The words landed like a stone in still water, rippling through every defense I had built. I turned away, busying myself with the terrace lights while my mind raced. This job was supposed to be simple. Instead, it felt like stepping onto a bridge I thought had burned down years ago. And as the first stars appeared over the bay, I wondered how long I could keep pretending the fire had ever gone out. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Wyatt's voice on a video call, arguing with his brother about quarterly reports. I brought in his breakfast smoothie and vitamins, trying to stay invisible. He ended the call abruptly, wheeling around to face me. My family thinks I'm weak now. They want to sell the company while I'm stuck in this chair. They don't know the half of it. I set the tray down carefully. You don't have to tell me anything. He shook his head. But I want to. Because you're the only person who ever saw me before the money, before the crash. And maybe I need to say it out loud to someone who won't run. His honesty cracked something open inside me. I sat on the edge of the couch across from him, listening as the sun climbed higher, painting the room in gold. For the first time in a decade, I felt seen too. And that terrified me more than anything. The confession didn't come all at once. It trickled out over the following days in fragments, between physical therapy sessions and late-night talks when pain kept him awake. Wyatt told me how his father had sat him down the morning after that kiss and laid out the ultimatum in cold, clinical terms. Leave Easton, cut all contact, or watch the family trust fund and every college connection evaporate. He had chosen survival, or what he thought was survival. I listened without interrupting, my hands steady as I massaged his shoulders, the only part of his body that still carried the tension of that old fear. I hated myself for it every single day, he said one afternoon while I helped him into the shower chair. Water steamed around us, but the air between us felt heavier. Especially when I heard you came out a couple years later. I wanted to reach out, but by then I was building the company and the lie felt too big to fix. I focused on the routine, checking the water temperature, adjusting the handheld sprayer, anything to keep my voice even. I came out because I couldn't keep lying to myself after you left. It hurt, but it also freed me. Or at least I thought it did. He reached up with the arm that still had full strength and brushed a droplet from my forearm. The touch was brief, almost accidental, but it sent electricity straight through me. You always were braver than me, Easton. That evening, after his meds kicked in and the penthouse settled into quiet, I sat on the terrace with my laptop, trying to answer emails from old nursing colleagues. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister back in Nebraska. Mom's asking again when you're bringing someone home. Any prospects in the big city? I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Prospects. The word tasted like ash. Every relationship since college had been careful, polite, and ultimately empty, because none of them had ever looked at me the way Wyatt once had. Now he was here, dependent on me for everything from getting dressed to facing the world, and the old feelings were waking up like muscles after years of atrophy. The next morning brought the first real test. Wyatt's younger brother Derek showed up unannounced, briefcase in hand, designer suit impeccable. He barely glanced at me when I opened the door. Wyatt, we need to talk about the board vote. The doctors say you're stable enough for the transfer of power. Wyatt's face hardened in the living room. I hovered near the kitchen island, pretending to organize supplies but listening to every word. Derek's voice dripped with false concern. You can't run an empire from a wheelchair, little brother. Let us handle it. You focus on recovery. The implication hung there that recovery meant disappearing from public view. Wyatt's reply was ice. I built this company with my brain, not my legs. And I'm not signing anything until I'm ready. Derek left in a huff, but not before shooting me a dismissive look. Make sure he rests, nurse. We pay you enough. The door clicked shut and Wyatt let out a long breath. He's always been like that. Dad's mini-me. They never knew about us, but they suspected enough to keep me on a short leash. I wheeled him closer to the window where the bay glittered under midday sun. You don't have to fight them alone anymore. The words slipped out before I could stop them. He looked up at me, surprise softening the edges of his exhaustion. You're not paid to fight my battles, Easton. No. I agreed, sitting on the coffee table so our eyes were level. But I'm here anyway. And maybe that means something. That night after I helped him into bed and dimmed the lights, he asked me to stay a little longer. We talked about everything and nothing, the movies we used to quote, the dreams we once shared, the way the world still treated men like us even in progressive cities. His voice grew quieter as the pain meds pulled him under, but right before sleep he murmured, I never stopped thinking about you. I sat there in the dark, the city humming far below, and felt the ground shift under me. This wasn't just a job anymore. It was the second chance neither of us had dared to hope for. And with it came the terrifying knowledge that second chances always came with a price. The following week we fell into a new rhythm. Morning exercises became conversations about his accident, the drunk driver, the months in the hospital when he realized the paralysis was permanent. Afternoons brought business calls where I sat quietly in the background, ready with water or adjustments. Evenings were ours. I read to him from the stack of books he kept by the bed, old sci-fi novels that reminded him of college. One night he reached for my hand during a quiet passage and didn't let go. The simple contact felt more intimate than anything I had experienced in years. I'm scared, he admitted softly. Not of the chair. Of what happens if I let myself feel this again and you realize I'm not worth the trouble. I squeezed his fingers. You were worth it then. You're worth it now. Outside the windows the fog rolled in over the bay, wrapping the city in soft gray. Inside the penthouse something fragile and real was beginning to grow. I didn't know yet how many storms we would have to weather, but for the first time in a decade I wasn't running from the possibility of love. I was leaning into it. And that choice was about to change everything. The misunderstanding hit on a rainy Thursday. I had stepped out to the pharmacy to refill Wyatt's prescriptions, leaving him with the part-time aid the agency sent twice a week. When I returned, the aid was gone and Wyatt sat rigid in his chair, staring at his phone screen like it had betrayed him. Everything okay? I asked, setting the bags down. He didn't look up. Derek called. Said he ran into an old friend of yours at a charity event. Someone who mentioned you were finally settling down with a nice guy back home. His voice was flat, but the hurt underneath cut deep. I didn't realize you had someone waiting in Nebraska. I froze mid-step. There is no one. My sister was joking in a text. Derek must have twisted it. Wyatt laughed bitterly, wheeling away toward the window. Sure. Because why would a healthy, attractive guy like you want to waste time on someone who can't even hold you properly? The words landed like stones. I crossed the room, kneeling in front of the chair so he had to meet my eyes. Don't do that. Don't push me away with some story you made up in your head. His jaw tightened, but I saw the fear flickering there, the same fear that had driven him away 10 years ago. I'm not the same scared kid, Wyatt. And you're not just a patient. Not to me. He looked away, rain streaking the glass behind him. Maybe you should be. My family is circling like sharks. If they find out about us again, they'll destroy everything I built. And you'll get caught in the crossfire. I stood slowly, my hands gentle on his shoulders. Then we face it together. No more running. That night the tension lingered, but so did something else. After I helped him into bed, he pulled me down for a soft, hesitant kiss, the kind that asked permission and offered forgiveness all at once. It wasn't passionate or rushed. It was real. And when we broke apart, he whispered, "Stay with me tonight." Just to talk. So I did. We talked until the rain stopped and the first gray light touched the bay. He told me about the months after the crash when he had considered giving up completely until the memory of my laugh kept him fighting. I told him about the nights I had driven past his old dorm hoping for a miracle. The misunderstanding dissolved into understanding, and by morning we had crossed a line we couldn't uncross. The weeks that followed brought small victories. Wyatt started physical therapy with new determination, his arm strength improving enough that he could maneuver the wheelchair independently around the penthouse. We took cautious outings to the rooftop garden where the city spread out below us and no one could see the way our hands brushed. I cooked simple meals, experimenting with textures he could manage, and he teased me mercilessly about my burnt toast. Laughter became our language, filling the spaces where doubt used to live. But the world outside didn't stop turning. Derek called more often, his messages growing sharper. "The board is getting impatient, Wyatt. Time to step aside." Each call left Wyatt quiet and withdrawn until I learned to distract him with stories from my nursing rotations or silly memories from college. One evening, after a particularly brutal call, Wyatt reached for me. "I don't want to hide anymore, Easton. Not from them. Not from myself." His words hung in the air, heavy with possibility. I kissed his forehead, feeling the weight of what he was asking. Coming out publicly as a gay man in a wheelchair running a billion-dollar company wasn't just personal, it was a declaration of war against everything his family stood for. "Then we do it right," I said. "Together. No secrets." He nodded, but I saw the shadow of old fear in his eyes. That night, as I lay on the couch in the guest room, listening to the distant hum of traffic, I wondered how much we would have to sacrifice before the world let us simply be. The answer came sooner than I expected. The next morning, a courier arrived with legal papers. Wyatt's father had filed to have him declared incompetent, citing the accident and emotional instability. The papers mentioned questionable personal relationships, in vague terms that made my stomach turn. Wyatt read them once, then again, his face pale. "They know. Or they suspect. And they're using it to take everything." I stood beside him, hand on his shoulder, feeling the tremor run through him. "We fight it. I'm not leaving." He looked up at me, then the steel returning to his gaze. "Neither am I. Not this time." In that moment, I saw the man I had fallen for all those years ago, the one who refused to be defined by fear. And I knew whatever came next, we would face it side by side. The misunderstanding that almost broke us had instead forged something stronger. Now we just had to survive the storm we both knew was coming. The family confrontation exploded 2 days later. Wyatt's father arrived with Derek and a lawyer in tow, the penthouse suddenly feeling too small for all the anger in the room. I stayed in the background as instructed, but close enough to hear every word. Mr. Harrington Sr. was everything Wyatt had described, tall, imposing voice like gravel. "This nonsense ends now, Wyatt. You're embarrassing the family name with your choices." He glanced in my direction, the disgust clear. "And hiring your little boyfriend as a nurse? Pathetic." Wyatt's hands gripped the wheelchair arms, knuckles white. "Easton is the best thing that's happened to me in years. And if you think you can take my company because of who I love, you're wrong." Derek smirked. "Love? You're in a chair, Dad. The board won't stand for a CEO who can't even walk into a meeting without help. Sign the papers. We'll make sure you're comfortable." The lawyer slid documents across the table. I stepped forward, unable to stay silent any longer. "He's competent. The medical reports prove it. You're doing this because you can't control him anymore. Mr. Harrington turned on me, eyes cold. "Stay out of family business, boy. Or we'll make sure your nursing license gets reviewed." The threat hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Wyatt's voice cut through it. "Leave him alone. This is between us." The argument stretched for an hour, accusations flying, old wounds reopened. I watched Wyatt hold his ground, voice steady even as his body betrayed him with fatigue. When the family finally left, slamming the door behind them, he sagged in the chair. I knelt beside him, wrapping my arms around his shoulders. "You were incredible." He leaned into me, breathing hard. "They'll come back harder. And they'll try to hurt you to get to me." I pressed my forehead to his. "Let them try. I'm not going anywhere." That night we sat together on the terrace under strings of soft lights, planning our next move. Wyatt decided to call a press conference announcing both the company's new accessibility initiatives and his relationship with me. "No more hiding," he said. "If they want a war, they'll get one. The days leading up to the press conference were a whirlwind of lawyers' PR teams and quiet moments where we simply held each other. I helped Wyatt rehearse his statement, practicing the words that would change both our lives. I am gay. I am paralyzed. And I am still the man who built this empire. Each rehearsal brought us closer, the fear transforming into determination. My own family called worried after Derek leaked rumors to the press. My mother's voice trembled over the phone. Are you sure about this, Easton? The world isn't kind to men like you. I looked at Wyatt across the room, smiling despite the chaos. I've never been more sure, Mom. This is who I am. The morning of the press conference dawned bright and clear. I helped Wyatt into a tailored suit, the fabric draping perfectly over his frame. He looked powerful, capable, every inch the billionaire he was. As we waited in the green room, he caught my hand. Whatever happens out there, I want you to know this is the best decision I've ever made. Because it includes you. I kissed him softly right there where anyone could walk in. We're in this together. The conference room buzzed with cameras when we entered. Wyatt spoke clearly and without apology. I stood beside him, hand resting lightly on his shoulder for the world to see. Flashes popped, questions flew, but through it all I felt only pride and the deep, steady certainty that we had chosen each other. The backlash was immediate. Social media exploded, some supportive, many vicious. Wyatt's stock dipped slightly, but his legal team moved fast, blocking the incompetence petition. That night back in the penthouse, we celebrated quietly with takeout and soft music. Wyatt pulled me onto the couch beside him. Thank you for staying through all of this. I rested my head against his. Thank you for letting me in. The confrontation with his family had stripped away every pretense, leaving only the truth of what we meant to each other. And in that truth we found strength neither of us had known we possessed. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time we were walking it without fear. The betrayal came from the one person I least expected. My best friend from nursing school, Marcus, had been my confidant through the whole ordeal, sending supportive texts and even offering to fly out for moral support. So when he showed up at the penthouse unannounced, I let him in without hesitation. Wyatt was in a meeting, so we sat in the kitchen catching up over coffee. You look happy, man, Marcus said, grinning. This Wyatt guy must be something special. I smiled, pouring him a refill. He is. For the first time, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Later that afternoon, while I helped Wyatt with his exercises, Marcus pulled me aside in the hallway. Listen, I didn't want to say anything, but I ran into Derek at a bar last night. He offered me a lot of money to get some information about Wyatt's condition. Medical details, stuff that could help their case. My blood ran cold. You didn't. Marcus looked away. I told him no, of course. But he implied he already had enough from other sources. I just thought you should know they're playing dirty. I confronted Wyatt that evening after Marcus left. His face darkened when I repeated the conversation. Marcus always did like easy money. I'll have security check the penthouse for bugs. The next morning, the story broke online. Anonymous sources claimed Wyatt was mentally unstable, and that his relationship with me was a desperate attempt to appear normal. The details were too precise, the medication list, the therapy notes, things only someone with access could know. Marcus's name wasn't mentioned, but I knew. Wyatt stared at the article for a long time, then closed the laptop. He sold us out. My own brother used your friend to try to destroy me. The pain in his voice mirrored my own. I had trusted Marcus with my deepest fears, and he had traded them for cash. The days that followed were the hardest yet. Wyatt withdrew into himself, working long hours on damage control while I struggled with the guilt of bringing Marcus into our lives. One night, I found him on the terrace staring at the lights below. I'm sorry, I whispered, sitting beside him. This is my fault. He turned to me, eyes fierce. None of this is your fault. They would have found another way. The only thing that matters is that we're still here. He reached for my hand. But I need you to promise me something. If this gets too ugly, if they come after your license or your family, you walk away. I won't let them break you too. I shook my head. I'm not walking away. Not now, not ever. The betrayal had cracked us, but instead of breaking us apart, it forced us to choose each other more deliberately. We spent the next week rebuilding trust, going over every detail of the leak, tightening security, and leaning on each other in ways we hadn't before. Wyatt's legal team filed countersuits, and slowly public opinion began to shift as supporters rallied around the story of two men fighting for their right to love openly. Through it all, the emotional toll showed. Wyatt's pain levels spiked from stress, and I found myself fighting my own doubts in the quiet hours. But every time I felt myself slipping, he would look at me and say, "We're stronger than them, Easton. Always have been." The climax came during a late-night strategy session. Wyatt's father called, demanding a private meeting. We agreed, but only on our terms, in the penthouse, with my presence required. When he arrived, the air crackled with hostility. "You've cost us millions with this circus," he snarled at Wyatt. "End it now and we'll drop everything." Wyatt met his father's gaze without flinching. "I'm not ending anything. Easton is my partner. Accept it or lose your son for good." The silence that followed was deafening. "Mr. Harrington looked between us, something almost like regret flickering in his eyes before the mask slammed back down. "You'll regret this." He left, but the threat lingered. That night, after the adrenaline faded, Wyatt pulled me close. "I sacrificed a lot to get here, but losing you would be the one thing I couldn't survive." I held him tighter, feeling the steady beat of his heart against mine. The betrayal by Marcus and the relentless pressure from Wyatt's family had tested every limit we had. Yet here we were, still standing, still choosing each other. The awakening wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet and profound, the realization that real love wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up even when the world tried to tear you down. And in that showing up, we had both become the men we were always meant to be. The dust settled slowly over the following months. Wyatt's legal team won the incompetence case. The board voted to keep him as CEO, and public support grew into a wave of advocacy for disability and LGBTQ rights. Marcus tried to apologize, but I blocked his number, the betrayal too fresh to forgive. Wyatt's father stopped calling, though we both knew the silence was temporary. Through it all, Easton and I built a life that felt like home. I continued as his caregiver, but the role had expanded into something deeper: partner, confidant, anchor. We started small. Weekend drives along the coast with the convertible top-down, Wyatt's chair secured in the back. Quiet dinners where we talked about the future instead of just surviving the present. One evening on the terrace, he surprised me with a small velvet box. Inside was a simple platinum ring engraved with the date of that first college kiss. "I can't kneel," he said with a wry smile, "but I can ask. Marry me, Easton. Let's build something they can never take away." Tears blurred my vision as I slipped the ring on. Yes. 1,000 times yes. The wedding was intimate, held in the penthouse with a handful of true friends and my sister, who flew out despite the family tension. Wyatt wore a custom suit. I helped him into that morning, our hands steady with purpose. When the officiant asked if we took each other as partners in all things, I looked into his eyes and saw every year of pain and every moment of joy that had led us here. "I do." His voice was strong, clear. "I do." Afterward, we sat together watching the sun set over the bay, the city lights beginning to sparkle like stars brought down to earth. "We made it," he whispered. "Against all of them, we made it." Life wasn't perfect. There were still bad pain days and occasional threats from his family. I faced questions at the hospital where I occasionally consulted, but none of it compared to the peace we had found. Wyatt started a foundation for LGBTQ youth with disabilities, using his platform to turn pain into purpose. I continued my nursing work part-time, focusing on patients who needed more than medicine. Together we became proof that love could survive anything if you were willing to fight for it. Looking back at the man I had become, I barely recognized the scared caregiver who had walked into this penthouse all those months ago. Wyatt had challenged me to stop running, and I had challenged him to stop hiding. The journey had been messy, full of misunderstandings, betrayals, and sacrifices, but every step had led us to this moment of quiet certainty. The city hummed below us, alive with possibility, and for the first time I felt truly free. True or false? Choosing love over family approval and professional safety always leads to true happiness.